I'm just a farmer from the countryside. Yet a top-tier award-winning actress is desperately trying to get back together with me, because 3 years ago, she left me without looking back in order to study abroad and further her career. She thought I would cry my eyes out, break down, and beg her to stay. Instead, I turned around, blocked and deleted her from everything, then carried my luggage home overnight and went back to farming. 3 years later, she stood by the ridge of my field, choking back tears. George, for the past 3 years, I've written you countless letters and said, I'm sorry, 10,000 times, but I never got a single response from you. I was too selfish, too annoying, too full of myself. I thought you would always be waiting where I left you. This time, can I be the one to chase after you? Chapter 1. Willow's return to the country was something I saw on the television in the village convenience store. At the time, I was chewing on a popsicle and playing chess with an old neighbor. The old man squinted at the screen while the female host on the entertainment news spoke in a voice sharp enough to pierce the roof. Breaking news. International Best Actress Willow officially returns home today to continue her career. This gifted actress, who won the Best Actress award at a major international film festival at only 24 years old, remains the center of attention wherever she goes. My hand trembled, and I nearly dropped a chess piece on my own foot. The old man chuckled and captured my knight. Kid, focus. Your chess skills are nowhere near as good as your farming. I stared at the television. Willow was walking out through the airport VIP passage. Sunglasses covered half her face, leaving only the sharp, cool line of her jaw visible. Camera flashes exploded non-stop around her. She gave a slight nod toward the cameras without smiling, then quickly left surrounded by bodyguards and staff. She looked nothing like the girl I remembered, the one who wore a ponytail and tugged on my sleeve while crying. They seemed like two completely different people. The old man followed my gaze and glanced at the television. You know her. Pretty girl. Sure. But she looks like trouble. I looked away and stuffed the half-melted popsicle into my mouth, the cold making my teeth ache. Don't know her. I replied vaguely. I'm just a farmer. How could someone like me ever be connected to a big celebrity like her? The old man clicked his tongue a couple of times and didn't ask further, turning his attention back to the chessboard. But my thoughts had already drifted away. 3 years. The day Willow left for overseas was also during summer. The airport was crowded and noisy. Her eyes were red like a rabbit's, and she clung tightly to the sleeve of my hoodie, her nails nearly digging into my skin. George, she said through tears, trying to sound fierce while looking pitiful at the same time. At most, I'll be gone for 2 years. Once I finish my studies, I'll come back. You're not allowed to like anyone else, and you're not allowed to forget me. Got it? What did I say back then? Oh, right. I know. You talk too much. Get going before you miss your flight. Then I pried her fingers off one by one and pushed her toward the security checkpoint. She kept looking back every few steps, tears falling endlessly down her face. I stood there until her figure disappeared into the crowd. Then I turned around. The moment I left the airport, I pulled out my phone and blocked and deleted her on WeChat, her number, and every possible way she could contact me. After that, I went home, packed the bare essentials, bought the earliest train ticket back to my hometown, and disappeared overnight. There was no dramatic conflict, no argument, no misunderstanding. I simply felt it was time to end things. Willow was too good, so good that I felt unworthy of her. She was like a rising star, destined to hang in the highest and brightest part of the sky. And I, George, was an ordinary man in every possible way. My greatest dream was to stay with the few acres of land back home, grow fruits and vegetables, nap under a tree in summer, and sit around a stove eating roasted sweet potatoes in winter. The paths of our lives diverged the moment she received her acceptance letter from one of the world's top film academies. She would keep running forward. I would stay where I was. The distance between us would only grow larger. Better a short pain than a long one. Before she could fly too high, I cut the string connecting us. It was good for her, and good for me. During these 3 years back home, I farmed, repaired the old house, and occasionally took on some freelance design work online. Life was as calm as the deep pond at the entrance of the village. Even throwing a stone into it barely caused a ripple. I thought my life would continue like that forever, until the village chief knocked on my door one day, grinning from ear to ear. George, great news, huge news. There's this countryside lifestyle show, a major production with a celebrity cast. They picked our village, and they specifically requested to use your courtyard for filming. My heart immediately sank. Why my place? I asked. The village chief slapped my shoulder enthusiastically. The production team said they fell in love with the atmosphere of your house. Authentic, full of rural charm. Don't worry, they'll pay, and not a small amount either. The whole village will get exposure. We might even become a tourist attraction. I tried to refuse, but the village chief didn't give me a chance. He left cheerfully, handing me a business card from the production team before walking away. The next day, People from the show arrived. The director, producers, and a large group of staff members walked around my courtyard, nodding repeatedly. Nice, really nice. This fence, this stone mill, this old well. It's perfect, the director, a middle-aged man with excitement shining in his eyes, said. Mr. Wong, we'll probably move in to set up the location in about 3 days and officially begin filming a week from now. During the filming period, we may need you to temporarily stay elsewhere. Of course, we'll arrange the best hotel in town for you. No need, I interrupted. I can stay at my second uncle's house next door. I needed to keep an eye on things. The uneasiness in my heart was growing wildly, like weeds spreading through an abandoned field. Chapter 2. 3 days later, my courtyard was packed with equipment, lighting rigs, reflectors, and cables. I squatted on the roof of my second uncle's house, watching the busy crowd below, feeling a strange sense of unreality. The day before filming officially began, the director handed me the final guest list so I could familiarize myself with the schedule. Even though you won't be appearing on camera, he said, try not to accidentally walk into any shots. I took the sheet of paper and scanned the names. Then my eyes stopped on the very last one. Willow. There it was, in black and white. My fingers tightened around the edge of the page until my knuckles turned white. Willow. I heard my own voice drift slightly. Yeah, Willow, the director replied excitedly. She's our biggest star. She just came back to the country and immediately joined our show. The buzz is going to be through the roof. He laughed. Didn't expect that. Huh. Mr. Wong follows entertainment news too. I forced a smile and said nothing. Follows? Way too closely. I had spent 3 years avoiding her, thinking that mountains, oceans, and completely different lives separated us. Yet one variety show had dropped her straight into my courtyard. What kind of ridiculous situation was this? Run. Should I grab my luggage and disappear again? I looked at the old courtyard. It had been transformed by the production team, yet traces of my childhood were still visible everywhere. Suddenly, I felt tired. You can run from a person, but you can't run from your home. My hometown was here. Where else could I go? What was coming would come eventually. The next day, filming officially began. Early in the morning, my second uncle dragged me out of bed, shoved an old straw hat onto my head, and handed me a hoe. Go wander around our vegetable plot for a while, he said. Don't hang around here. It'll be a pain if they accidentally film you. I put on the straw hat, slung the hoe over my shoulder, and slowly headed toward the fields on the other side of the village. My thoughts were a mess. I couldn't even describe what I was feeling. Nervous. A little. Afraid. Not really. More than anything, it was a kind of numb resignation. I absent-mindedly pulled weeds for a while. As the sun climbed higher into the sky, I remembered the laundry hanging in my courtyard. Figuring the production team probably wouldn't be filming there at this hour, I casually started walking back. Before I even reached my house, I heard an uproar of voices. It was livelier than a market day. The cameras of the production crew were all pointed toward the gate of my courtyard. Instinctively, I wanted to hide, but my feet refused to move. The gate swung open. Someone walked inside. A white linen shirt, light blue denim shorts, and an oversized straw hat that the production team had clearly prepared for the show. The sunlight wrapped her in a soft golden glow. She lifted her head and looked toward the main camera. A perfectly timed smile appeared on her face, nostalgic, surprised, and natural all at once. The curve of her lips, the sparkle in her eyes, everything was so precise that it felt measured with a ruler. Hello, everyone. Her voice floated through the noisy background, clear and pleasant, carrying a faint smile. I'm Willow. She glanced around the courtyard. This is the place where I lived when I was little. It feels very familiar. My breathing stopped for a moment. Then, as if sensing something, her gaze shifted away from the camera. It landed directly on me, hidden beneath the shade of a tree, perfectly, accurately, as though she had known exactly where I was standing all along. The smile on her face froze instantly. The warmth and gentleness that had filled her beautiful eyes vanished like a receding tide. In their place remained only a cold, sharp scrutiny, and anger. Between us stood more than 10 meters of distance. Between us were busy staff members and rows of dark camera lenses. Yet we stared at each other without moving. Time seemed to stretch. Every second became thick and suffocating. I stood frozen. A mud-stained hoe still hung from my hand. A ridiculous old straw hat sat on my head. I looked exactly like what I was, a clueless farmer who had somehow wandered onto a film set. She looked at me. I looked at her. After 3 years apart, she had become even more beautiful. Not the youthful beauty I remembered, but a refined beauty that carried distance and elegance. She looked completely out of place among the mud brick walls and broken fences. But the fire in her eyes, that hadn't changed at all. The director seemed to notice something. Following Willow's gaze, he looked toward me. His expression froze for a moment, then his face changed. He quickly said something into his walkie-talkie before frantically waving at me. signaling for me to leave immediately. I finally snapped back to reality. Lowering the brim of my straw hat, I turned and prepared to slip away. Wait, a cool female voice rang out. It wasn't loud, yet it carried an inexplicable force that cut through the air. The noisy chatter around us seemed to fade away instantly. Chapter 3. My back stiffened instantly. Under everyone's watchful eyes, Willow took 2 steps in my direction. Then she stopped, looking toward the director. She put on that flawless, gentle smile again. Only her eyes remained cold. Pointing at me, she asked, "Director, who's that?" The director hurriedly explained. "Oh, him? He's a relative of the homeowner, not part of the production team. No need to pay attention to him." Willow. As he finished speaking, he shot me a stern glare. Willow let out a soft "oh," the final note rising slightly. Then she looked at me again. Her gaze swept over the hoe in my hand and the mud-covered shoes on my feet. A faint smile curved her lips. It was shallow and impossible to read. "He looks familiar," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was more than enough for the nearby staff and microphone booms to pick up. For a moment, I thought he was an old friend of mine. My heartbeat slammed against my ears like a drum. I didn't dare look back. Almost moving in sync like a malfunctioning robot, I fled the area as fast as I could. The gaze behind me felt like a red-hot needle stabbing into my spine. Back at my second uncle's house, I locked myself in the room. My heart was still pounding. Familiar? Old friend. She had absolutely done that on purpose. With Willow's current status and acting skills, if she truly wanted to pretend not to know me, there were 10,000 ways she could have smoothly covered it up. She could have ignored me completely. Yet she had chosen to say that, in that setting, with that tone. What exactly was she trying to do? I collapsed onto the bed and stared at the yellowed patterns on the ceiling. My thoughts were a tangled mess. For the rest of the day, I couldn't sit still. My second uncle's house wasn't far from mine, and the sounds from the filming location drifted over from time to time. Laughter, conversations, and occasionally Willow's clear, pleasant voice. She was completely at ease in front of the cameras, introducing the courtyard where she used to play as a child, that old well, the persimmon tree by the gate. Her voice carried just the right amount of nostalgia and sentimentality. Listening to it sent chills down my spine. The childhood and youth we had shared together had become nothing more than a lightly sketched background story in a variety show script, a footnote to prove how down-to-earth she was, a detail supporting her carefully crafted public image. It was so damn absurd. I pulled out my phone. The screen was black. During the 3 years I'd spent back home, I had practically become half a caveman. The smartest thing I used my smartphone for was scanning payment codes and checking the weather. Social media. I had deleted all of it years ago, but at that moment, a powerful sense of unease pushed me to reinstall my account. Download, install, open. I logged into an account that had been gathering dust for years. The notification icon exploded instantly. 99.99 plus. Direct messages, comments, mentions, likes. Red dots filled the entire screen. My phone even froze for several seconds. My fingers trembled slightly as I opened my inbox. The newest messages had all arrived within the last few minutes. They were still burning with fresh excitement. Holy crap, everyone. Go watch the Countryside Life live stream. Is that guy carrying the hoe the childhood sweetheart Willow was talking about? Blogger, are you still alive? What's your relationship with Willow? Came here from the trending topics. Bro, you're famous. We only got your back view and half your face. But you're seriously handsome. That rugged, worn-out heartthrob vibe. Please investigate. Who exactly is Willow's mysterious childhood sweetheart? Is it you? Is this scripted by the production team? Publicity stunt? I kept scrolling. Older messages were a chaotic mix. A few greetings from followers who had originally followed me years ago because I posted a photo of the scenery back in my hometown. Random advertisements. But most of them had poured in over the past few hours like a tidal wave after the live stream of Countryside Life began. They were full of shock, curiosity, gossip, and endless questioning. I opened the trending topics list. 3 related hashtags were sitting right in the top 10. Willow's childhood sweetheart, explosive. The mysterious non-celebrity from Countryside Life, hot. Why did he run away overnight? New. Chapter 4. My eyelid twitched violently. I tapped on the 3rd trending topic. The top post was from an entertainment gossip account, accompanied by several screenshots from the live stream. One showed Willow standing in my courtyard. Another captured my blurry side profile as I turned and fled with a hoe over my shoulder and a straw hat on my head. The last was a close-up of Willow looking in my direction, her expression turning cold in that split second. The caption was written to stir up as much drama as possible. Shocking gossip alert. Willow's childhood sweetheart appears on Countryside Life live stream. According to eyewitnesses on set, The filming location is actually the courtyard where Willow lived as a child. The young man who appeared there is suspected to have had an unusually close relationship with her. Willow's expression changed instantly when she saw him, and she even made a cryptic remark about a familiar old friend. Even more mysteriously, a netizen claiming to be a former neighbor revealed that shortly after Willow left to study abroad, this childhood sweetheart suddenly moved away overnight and disappeared without a trace. What kind of heartbreaking love story and unresolved grudge is this? Follow us for more updates. The comment section had already exploded. Holy crap, is this a novel coming to life? A top actress and her runaway childhood sweetheart. Am I the only one obsessed with that guy's side profile? It's blurry, but he's seriously handsome. That rugged, untamed vibe. The real question is why he ran away. Willow went abroad and he moved away immediately. That's ruthless. Maybe he did something to hurt Waiwi. Is he a jerk? The way Waiwi looked at him was ice cold. There's definitely history there. I'm just passing by. But this show feels way too scripted. Are they going to give us a reunion arc next? Doesn't feel scripted. Willow's expression changed too naturally. Her acting is amazing, but nobody controls micro-expressions that perfectly. Am I the only one curious about who this guy actually is? Can someone explain? I found a lead. Tagging it George might be him. The account stopped updating 3 years ago, and the location matches. At George bro, say something. I closed the page and tossed my phone aside. My temples throbbed. I was screwed. Completely screwed. Now I had been dragged into the spotlight for everyone to see. I could already imagine reporters, paparazzi, influencers, and gossip hunters trying every possible way to find this remote little village. So much for a peaceful life. I ran a hand through my hair irritably and stared at the account that had been dormant for 3 years, only to suddenly become the target of countless mentions. Should I say something? Explain myself? But how? Should I tell everyone that I thought I wasn't good enough for her? So I ran away out of insecurity. Who would believe that? Even I thought it sounded melodramatic and ridiculous when I looked back on it now. Or should I say that I got tired of waiting? Tired of uncertainty? That I cut ties because I wanted a clean break? That would only make me sound even more like a heartless jerk. No matter what I said, it would be wrong. I was lying on the bed staring blankly at the ceiling when the phone beside me suddenly buzzed. A text message. For some reason, my chest tightened. Slowly, I picked up the phone. A message from an unfamiliar number sat on the screen. Only a few words, yet they hit my eyes like shards of ice. George, you'd better explain why. On the very day I came back to the country, your family just happened to move away. Sent 5 minutes ago. No contact name, but that number. Even after 3 years, I recognized it instantly. The last 4 digits were 1017. Her birthday. Willow. She had found me after all. I stared at the message. My finger hovered over the screen. Not a single word came to mind. Explain. Explain what? That I was a coward. That I was insecure. That I foolishly convinced myself disappearing was the best thing for her. She wouldn't believe any of it. Or rather, she didn't need those explanations. Knowing Willow as well as I did, she hadn't sent that message because she wanted an answer. She sent it because she was angry, because she wanted to confront me, because she wanted me to know one thing. George, you're finished. You can't hide anymore. I rubbed my face, turned off the screen, and tossed the phone back onto the bed. Outside, the noise from the Countryside Life production crew seemed quieter now. They had probably moved to another filming location. The setting sun shone through the old glass window, casting a patch of dim golden light across the concrete floor. In the yard, the gardenia tree my mother had planted years ago was blooming more wildly than ever this year. The evening breeze carried its fragrance into the room again and again. Rich, sweet, almost bitter. It reminded me of the youth Willow and I had shared, a season that never had the chance to fully bloom before it began to decay. Chapter 5. I didn't know how much time had passed when my phone vibrated again. Another text message, the same number. This time, the message was even shorter, just one word, and a period. Speak. Even through the screen, I could picture her expression perfectly. Her lips pressed into a thin line, those beautiful brows slightly furrowed, anger simmering in her eyes, and perhaps, hidden beneath it all, a trace of hurt that even she hadn't realized was there. Something struck my chest, a dull ache spread through me, sour and numb at the same time. In the end, I picked up the phone and opened the reply box. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long time, typing, deleting, typing again. Finally, I sent a dry, lifeless sentence. There's nothing to explain. It's all in the past. Send. The moment it went through, I powered off my phone and shoved it beneath my pillow, as if that could somehow block out all the pressure carried by that number. I lay on the bed with my eyes open until darkness swallowed the last trace of daylight. My second uncle called me for dinner, but I had no appetite. I claimed I wasn't feeling well and stayed in my room. Late that night, The village returned to silence. The production crew had apparently wrapped for the day. Even the direction of my courtyard had gone dark. But I knew one thing. Once certain things were uncovered, there was no putting them back. The next morning, I was jolted awake by violent pounding on the door. George, George, open up. Something happened. It was my second uncle. His voice was so frantic it barely sounded like him. I shot upright and rushed to open the door. My uncle was drenched in sweat, pointing outside. He stammered. Quick, get to your courtyard. That big celebrity, why? Willow, she fainted. My mind went blank. Fainted. Willow. There was no time to think. I grabbed a t-shirt, shoved it on, slipped into a pair of sandals, and sprinted outside. The morning air was cool and damp, yet I was sweating by the time I reached the courtyard. A crowd had gathered outside my house. Production staff, curious villagers, everyone talking over one another. The director and producers looked frantic, while several accompanying medical staff crouched in the center of the yard. I pushed through the crowd. Willow was lying beneath the old locust tree on the woven rattan lounge chair, the same chair where I had spent yesterday afternoon enjoying the shade. Her face was pale. Her eyes were shut. A thin layer of cold sweat covered her forehead. Her lips had lost most of their color. The floral cotton dress the production team had given her that morning was stained with dirt, and the hem hung in disarray. In her hand, she was gripping something tightly, an old metal box. The edges were rusted. I recognized it instantly. It was the box I used to hide my treasures in as a child. I had hidden it inside a crack beneath my bedroom floor. Even my parents had never known about it. How had she found it? And why had she collapsed here holding it? What happened? I heard the tension in my own voice. The director looked as if he'd just spotted a lifeline. Mr. Wong, thank goodness you're here. Teacher Willow said she wanted to walk around by herself this morning and revisit some childhood memories. She specifically asked us not to follow her with cameras, so we didn't think much of it. Then after more than half an hour, she still hadn't returned. Her assistant went looking and found her unconscious here. He pointed at the metal box. She was holding that. The accompanying doctor, a middle-aged woman, looked up and spoke quickly. Our preliminary assessment is hypoglycemia, combined with emotional distress. Nothing serious. We've already given her sugar. She just needs rest. However, she never fully regained consciousness, and she's gripping that box so tightly we can't remove it. Emotional distress. I looked at Willow's pale face, at the hand clutching the rusted metal box so hard that her knuckles had turned white. Something deep inside me tightened painfully. Let me try. I stepped forward and crouched beside her. The courtyard instantly fell silent. Every gaze focused on me. Curiosity, suspicion, excitement, anticipation. I ignored them all. Reaching out, I gently placed my hand over the back of hers. Her skin was cold, still trembling slightly. Willow. I lowered my voice and spoke the name I hadn't said aloud in 3 years. Let go. No response. If anything, her brows seemed to knit together even tighter. I took a slow breath. Then, with my other hand, I carefully began prying her fingers open one by one, as gently as possible, as though handling fragile porcelain. Maybe she recognized the familiar touch. Maybe she heard my voice. Or maybe both. Whatever the reason, her fingers slowly relaxed beneath mine. One after another, the metal box slipped free and fell into my hands. It felt surprisingly heavy, and at that exact moment, Willow's long eyelashes trembled. Then, little by little, she opened her eyes. Chapter 6. Her eyes were unfocused for a few seconds. Then they quickly sharpened and landed on my face, only inches away. There was no coldness, no anger, only a blank, fragile vulnerability stripped of all disguise. But it lasted for only a moment. Soon, that familiar shell covered in thorns wrapped itself around her once again. She looked away and tried to sit up. Don't move. The doctor immediately stopped her. Rest a little longer. How are you feeling? Dizzy. I'm fine. Willow's voice was slightly hoarse, but calm. Her gaze swept over the crowd gathered around her before finally landing on the metal box in my hands. She paused briefly, then looked away again. Sorry for causing trouble for everyone. It's probably just low blood sugar, an old problem. She spoke to the director and staff with her usual composure. Though her face remained pale, the director finally relaxed. He repeatedly assured her that everything was fine and told her to focus on resting. Today's filming schedule could be adjusted. Gradually, the crowd dispersed. Only a few core staff members and medical assistants remained. Willow leaned back against the lounge chair with her eyes closed, seemingly trying to recover. Sunlight filtered through the leaves of the locust tree above, scattering shifting patches of light across her face. I stood there holding the metal box, unable to leave, unable to stay. George, she suddenly spoke without opening her eyes. Yeah. She paused for a moment before continuing. What you're holding belongs to me. I froze, lowering my head. I looked at the metal box in my hands. It was definitely one of my childhood belongings. How had it become hers? I tried to explain. Those are things I hid when I was little. I know. Willow interrupted me, finally opening her eyes. She looked at me. Her expression was calm, yet carried a force that allowed no argument. Marbles, water margin trading cards, and a few pebbles. Right. I was speechless. How could she know the contents so clearly? As if reading my confusion, the corner of her mouth twitched slightly. It looked like mockery, or perhaps something else. Because, she said quietly, I'm the one who put them there. My mind went completely blank. She slowly pushed herself upright. The doctor tried to help her, but she lightly waved the offer away. Supporting herself on the armrest, she stood, still a little unsteady. Then she walked over to me. Reaching out, she took the metal box from my hands. With some effort, she pried open the rusted lid. Inside, there were no marbles, no trading cards, only a thick stack of letters tied neatly together with a purple ribbon. The envelopes were all the same pale blue color. In the lower right corner, elegant handwriting read, "To George." The sender's section was blank. The postmark on the first letter dated back 4 years. The most recent one was from 3 years ago, roughly 3 months after she had left the country. Dozens upon dozens of letters, perhaps even over 100. They lay silently inside the rusted metal box. I felt as though I had been nailed to the spot. Blood rushed to my head, then drained away just as quickly. She had written letters to me. That many? And I had never received a single one. No, more accurately, I had never even known they existed. Willow pulled out the top envelope. Her fingers brushed lightly across its yellowed edges. Then she raised her eyes and looked at me. In those beautiful eyes, my confusion and shock were reflected with perfect clarity. The first month after I went abroad, I wrote 2 letters every week. Her voice was quiet, flat, as if she were telling someone else's story. Later it became 1 letter a week, and after that, 1 letter a month. I kept writing for an entire year. She looked down at the stack. Every single one was sent to this address. She paused. Then her gaze drifted across the courtyard where we had grown up together. Willow pressed her lips together. Yet somehow they all got lost. Not a single reply. The corner of her mouth curved upward, but the smile was ice cold. George, tell me, was the mail carrier unreliable? Or, her eyes locked onto mine, did the person receiving the letters simply never want to receive them in the first place? I opened my mouth, but something seemed lodged in my throat. No words came out. At last, I understood. While I had arrogantly cut off every line of communication and convinced myself I had disappeared from her world forever, she had been trying, again and again, to reach me in the oldest, clumsiest way possible, and I, like an idiot, had known absolutely nothing about it. Chapter 7. A massive sense of absurdity and a dull, belated pain crashed over me like a tidal wave. My voice sounded dry and strained even to my own ears. I didn't know those letters existed. When I came back, the house had already been emptied. I thought this box had been lost a long time ago. Really? Willow let out a quiet laugh. Her gaze settled on my face, carefully examining me. So you didn't leave overnight because you'd received something? Or because you were afraid of receiving something? She put particular emphasis on the words leave overnight. I didn't. I immediately protested, my voice rising. I just thought, but the rest refused to come out. I thought I wasn't good enough for you. I thought I should let you go and fly higher. Now, hearing it in my own head, it sounded like nothing more than a coward's excuse for running away. What did you think? Willow pressed, taking another step closer. The faint fragrance on her body mixed with the lingering scent of medicine and drifted into my senses. Despite her pale complexion, her presence hadn't weakened in the slightest. The air around us seemed frozen. The director and staff exchanged nervous glances. Nobody dared interrupt. This had long since gone beyond an unexpected incident during filming. It looked more like the settlement of a deeply personal debt. I looked into her eyes. They were close enough now that I could clearly see everything swirling inside them. Anger, hurt, confusion, resentment, and a wound she was trying desperately to hide. The emotions I had convinced myself were erased by time and distance had never disappeared at all. She had merely hidden them carefully, until now, until this rusted metal box had blown them all apart. I thought. My voice came out painfully hoarse. Every word felt as though it were being dragged out of my chest. I thought we belonged to different worlds. Willow, you're meant to become a huge star. You're meant to stand in the brightest place possible. And me? I looked around the courtyard. I just wanted to stay here, live a peaceful life. Keeping things going would only become a burden. For you, and for me. At last, I had finally said it. The excuse I had polished and repeated to myself through countless sleepless nights over the past 3 years. Willow listened quietly. Not a single expression crossed her face. Only after I finished did she blink. Slowly, very slowly. George, she said my name so softly it sounded almost like a sigh. Who told you that I couldn't enter your world? The question hit me like a blow. Before I could answer, she continued, "And who gave you permission to decide for me what was supposedly best for me?" Her tone remained calm, but every word cut like a blade. "You thought it would become a burden, so you ran. You didn't even ask me. You didn't even give me a proper goodbye." "George." She stared directly into my eyes. "Do you look down on me that much? Or do you look down on yourself that much?" I couldn't answer. A hole seemed to rip open inside my chest. Cold wind rushed through it endlessly. "These letters." She lifted the metal box slightly. The envelopes inside rustled softly. "This was the world I wanted to leave for you. I wanted to tell you that the world outside was huge, that the wind was cold. But every time I saw something interesting, every time I tasted something delicious, every time I suffered a setback, the first person I wanted to tell was still you." She looked at me. Her eyes reddened visibly, yet she stubbornly tilted her head back, refusing to let the tears gather. "But you shut that world out." "No." She gave a bitter laugh. "You didn't shut the door. You tore the entire door down and ran away." The smile she forced onto her face looked worse than crying. "George." Her voice trembled slightly. "You really are a bastard." The final word fell lightly into the air, yet it struck my heart with crushing force. Silence. Absolute silence. Even the wind seemed to have stopped. The director desperately signaled to the camera operators, "Shut everything down, now." This wasn't material for a variety show anymore. This was raw emotion, bleeding and exposed. After saying those words, Willow seemed to lose all her strength. Her body swayed almost imperceptibly. Fortunately, her assistant reacted quickly and caught her. She didn't look at me again. Holding the metal box tightly against her chest, she turned away. Supported by her assistant, she slowly walked toward the temporary lounge the production team had set up. Step by step, slow, steady, determined. Her back remained perfectly straight, yet somehow, it carried an indescribable loneliness. I remained standing where I was, like a clown abandoned in the center of a stage. My hands were empty. My heart was empty too. Only that quiet accusation continued echoing in my ears. A bastard. Again, and again, and again. It was only then that I realized the truth. Everything I had called, doing it for her. Everything I had praised as a clean and decisive ending. In her eyes, it had been nothing but cowardly escape. An irresponsible betrayal. The sunlight remained bright. The chickens in the courtyard continued wandering lazily. A television could be heard from a neighbor's house in the distance. Everything looked exactly the same as before. Yet my world had collapsed completely in the span of a few minutes, reduced to ruins. A total mess. Only then did I understand. Some wounds don't stop hurting simply because you refuse to touch them. They merely bury themselves in the deepest corners of your heart, waiting until one unexpected moment, when they tear themselves open, bringing flesh, blood, and all the pain with them. Chapter 8. Willow was escorted back to the temporary trailer by her assistant and several staff members. The director wiped the sweat from his forehead and walked over to me. He looked at me with a complicated expression, patted my shoulder, and let out a long sigh. In the end, he said nothing and followed after them. The villagers who had gathered to watch gradually dispersed as well. They whispered among themselves, occasionally glancing back at me. Their eyes were full of curiosity and speculation. In the blink of an eye, the courtyard was empty. Only I remained, along with the trampled grass scattered across the ground and the faint trace of Willow's fragrance lingering in the air. Slowly, I crouched down and sat on one of the exposed roots of the old locust tree. Running my fingers through my hair, I pressed hard against my aching temples. Those letters, the letters she had written. I didn't even dare imagine what was inside them. Stories about the strange and fascinating things she encountered overseas. Confessions of loneliness and homesickness. Or perhaps, question after question, waiting after waiting. Words written to someone who never answered. And I, a complete fool, hidden inside my own shell. What I had called sacrifice, what I had called letting her go, had become the sharpest knife I could have driven into her. My phone vibrated in my pocket, again and again. I didn't even need to look. Something new had probably exploded online. Even though the director had cleared the area quickly, there was no guarantee that some fast-handed staff member or villager hadn't recorded part of the scene and uploaded it. Sure enough, a short while later, my second uncle came running over, clutching his old-fashioned phone. "Kiddo, this is bad." He was visibly panicked. "Those boys in the village said you and that celebrity girl, you're all over the internet." Not the show itself. One of those short videos. They're saying all kinds of things. I took the phone from him. On the screen was a video from a short-form video platform. The footage was shaky and blurry, but both Willow and I were clearly recognizable. It was paired with sensational headlines and overly dramatic background music. The comments section was a complete disaster. Speculation, insults, gossip. The feed was overflowing with them. Netizens were commenting, "Confirmed. They're definitely exes. Just look at the atmosphere. So this guy made why we faint. Scumbag. Get lost. Am I the only one who thinks the guy looks miserable too? Maybe there's a misunderstanding. Seeing Why We Cry breaks my heart. What is the production team doing? Protect our Why We. This has to be scripted. Reality shows will do anything for ratings these days. Scripted or not, I'm obsessed. Reunited lovers are the greatest trope ever. I handed the phone back to my uncle and forced a smile. It's fine, uncle. Don't pay attention to it. Most of it's nonsense anyway. My uncle looked at me. He seemed like he wanted to say something, but after a long pause, he merely sighed. I don't understand you young folks, but that girl, before she fainted, she wandered around this courtyard for a long time. She just stood there staring at that persimmon tree, and the old well, the look in her eyes. His voice softened. It was hard to watch. Shaking his head, he walked away with his hands clasped behind his back. I lifted my gaze toward the tall persimmon tree in the courtyard. Every autumn, it would be covered with little red gold fruits that looked like hanging lanterns. Back when we were kids, Willow always complained that I was clumsy at climbing trees to pick persimmons. She would stand underneath, anxiously shouting instructions while I fumbled around in the branches. And that old well. Every summer, we'd lower watermelons into it to chill them. Then we'd sit beside the well and split them in half. The sweet, icy fruit could drive away the entire season's heat. So she remembered. Not only remembered, she had treasured those memories. The very memories I had tried to bury and leave behind. The memories she had carefully written into letter after letter that vanished into silence. The pain lodged in my chest spread even further. Sharper. Heavier. I slowly stood up and brushed the dirt from my pants. I couldn't keep doing this. This mess had started because of me. At the very least, I couldn't continue hiding like a coward while Willow faced all the rumors, accusations, and prying eyes alone. Even if she didn't need my help, even if she didn't want it, I owed her that much. Chapter 9. I walked toward the temporary rest area marked off by the production crew. A cordon line blocked the area, with staff standing guard. When they saw me, their expressions turned a little strange, but no one stopped me. The door of Willow's RV was closed. Her assistant, a short-haired young woman who looked capable and efficient, was standing outside the vehicle, holding her phone and speaking in a low voice. Her brows were tightly furrowed. When she saw me approaching, she ended the call and looked at me with scrutiny and faint wariness. Mr. Wong, is there something you need? Her tone was polite yet distant. I want to see Willow, I said. The assistant raised an eyebrow. Miss Willow needs to rest. It's not convenient for her to receive visitors right now. And, Mr. Wong, she paused, lowering her voice slightly. You saw what happened earlier. Whatever personal grievances existed between you two before, Miss Willow is now a guest on this show and a public figure. Your appearance has already caused her considerable trouble and may even affect her work and reputation. I hope you can understand and keep your distance for the time being. She was direct and far from courteous, but from her perspective, it was perfectly understandable. I know. I nodded. I just want to apologize to her in person. There are some things that need to be made clear. Once I've said what I need to say, I'll leave. I won't disturb her rest, and I won't appear within the filming area again. The assistant looked troubled. It was obvious she didn't believe me and had no desire to let me get anywhere near Willow. Just then, the RV door clicked open from the inside. Willow stood in the doorway. She had already changed out of the floral dress and was now wearing a simple white cotton t-shirt and light gray sweatpants. There was barely any makeup on her face. Her complexion was still somewhat pale, but her eyes had regained their clarity and composure, carrying even a trace of weary indifference. Lisa, she said, her voice slightly hoarse as she addressed her assistant. Let me speak with him alone for a few minutes. Miss Willow, your health, Lisa protested anxiously. It's fine, just a few minutes. Willow's tone was calm, yet it left no room for argument. Lisa looked at her, then shot me a glare. In the end, she reluctantly stepped away and turned her back, though she remained close enough to rush over at any moment. Willow stepped down from the RV and casually closed the door behind her. More than a meter separated us. Silence flowed through the air. What do you want to say? She asked first. Her gaze rested on the old locust tree behind me instead of on me. My throat felt dry. The speech I had prepared rolled around on my tongue several times, but in the end, only a few stiff words came out. I'm sorry. She seemed to let out a quiet laugh. There was unmistakable mockery in it. Sorry for what? She asked. Sorry for leaving without a word, or sorry for never reading those letters, or she finally shifted her gaze to me. Sorry for making me wait like a fool for a reply that was never going to come. Every sentence struck my heart like a whip. All of it. I took a deep breath and forced myself to meet her eyes. I'm sorry, Willow. I was arrogant. I was cowardly. I ruined everything. When I left back then, it wasn't because I'd received something, or because I was afraid of receiving something. I genuinely felt that we'd reached a crossroads. You were heading toward a bigger, farther world. It was a wonderful place, but it wasn't somewhere I belonged, or somewhere I wanted to go. I thought that cutting things off completely would be better for both of us. It would let you fly without any attachments, and let me stay content with the life I already had. I spoke slowly, carefully choosing my words. I dug out those petty and shameful thoughts that had been buried deep inside me for years, thoughts I had never shared with anyone, and laid them bare before her. I said, I never imagined you would write letters, and I definitely never imagined those letters would end up stuffed into that box I thought had been thrown away long ago when my parents were clearing out old belongings. The box got moved back to my hometown with a pile of useless junk, and then somehow ended up forgotten in a crack in the wall. I let out a bitter laugh. It sounds like an excuse, but that's how absurd the truth really is. If I had simply taken a closer look at this house, at those old things that were moved back here, I might have found them, but I didn't. I was like a deserter. I ran away without ever looking back, convincing myself that I was doing the right thing. Chapter 10. Willow listened quietly, her face showing little emotion. Only the fingers hanging at her side curled slightly. These past 3 years, my life has been peaceful, I continued, my voice growing softer. Working the fields, cooking, fixing things around the house, taking on odd jobs now and then. I thought I had already let go of the past, until I saw you come back on television, until you pushed open the gate to my yard. I paused, feeling a sting behind my eyes. That's when I realized I had never let go at all. I had only buried it so deep that I convinced myself I had forgotten. Willow, I regret it, not leaving. I regret the way I left. I regret not having the courage to explain everything to you face to face. I regret leaving you alone to carry all the confusion and heartbreak. After saying that, it felt as though all my strength had been drained away. I fell silent and waited for her judgment. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting scattered patches of light and shadow across the ground between us. In the distance came the faint sounds of the production crew testing equipment. A long time passed, so long that I thought she would never speak again. Then she finally said something, her voice so faint it sounded like a sigh. George, you're still as self-righteous as ever. My heart tightened. You thought you were doing what was best for me, so you made the decision on my behalf. You thought you weren't good enough for me, so you ended our relationship unilaterally. You thought a quiet life was what you wanted, so you hid yourself here. She raised her eyes. They were clear and bright, reflecting my flustered and helpless expression with painful clarity. Did you ever ask me what I wanted? I was speechless. What I wanted was always very simple. She took a small step forward, closing the distance between us. I could even see the tiny traces of moisture still clinging to her long eyelashes. I never wanted to stand alone in some so-called brightest place. What I wanted was that no matter how high I flew or how far I went, when I looked back, I would know there was someone there. He didn't need to be extraordinary or dazzling. As long as he was there, that was enough. Her voice was gentle, yet it carried overwhelming weight. Every word struck straight into my heart. But you never even asked. You eliminated me from the choice before I had any say. George, what gave you that right? I had no answer. My heart felt as though it were being squeezed by an invisible hand, hurting so much that I couldn't make a sound. Those letters. She looked away toward the distant fields, her voice growing quieter. At first, they were complaints. Complaints about how terrible the food overseas was. Complaints about struggling with the language. Complaints about missing home. Later, they became stories. Stories about getting a role after a successful audition. Stories about standing on an awards stage for the first time. Stories about how hurt I felt when irresponsible media outlets published false things about me. And after that, they became questions. Questions asking why I hadn't heard a single word from you. Questions asking whether I had done something wrong. She sniffed and tried to steady her voice. In the last letter, I wrote, George, if you really don't want anything to do with me anymore, then at least tell me yourself. Don't leave me talking to myself like some kind of joke. She turned back toward me. Her eyes were red. At last, tears rolled down her pale cheeks. Willow choked back a sob. But even that, you couldn't give me. I stared at the tears on her face. It felt as though a knife had carved a piece out of my heart. The pain was so intense that I nearly doubled over. Never before had I understood so clearly how foolish and cruel my decision had been. The decision I had once convinced myself was for her own good. I'm sorry. Those hollow, powerless words were all I could manage. Willow raised a hand and wiped away her tears forcefully, as if trying to erase every trace of weakness. George, I've heard your apology. She looked at me. The cool distance from before had returned to her eyes. Yet somewhere deep within them, something seemed different. But some things, once broken, stay broken, she said. A single apology doesn't make them disappear as if they never happened. Chapter 11. After saying that, she didn't look at me again and turned toward the RV. Willow, I called out instinctively. She stopped in her tracks but didn't turn around. My throat tightened. Those letters. I swallowed hard. Could I see them? With her back still facing me, she remained silent for a few seconds before speaking. I threw them away, she said. This morning, I was planning to find a place to burn them. I didn't expect my low blood sugar to act up. With that, she pulled open the door and stepped into the RV. The door closed gently in front of me, separating two completely different worlds. I stood there, staring at the closed door, staring at my own lost and desolate reflection in the window. Thrown away. Maybe that was for the best. Those sheets of paper that had carried a year of her hopes, disappointments, and eventual silence perhaps were never meant to be seen by me again. Some mistakes remain mistakes once they're made. Some cracks remain cracks once they exist. Not every "I'm sorry" can earn an "it's okay." And not everyone who leaves has the right to come back. The sunlight was still blazing overhead, scorching the skin exposed to it. Yet somewhere deep inside me, it felt as if a piece had been torn away, leaving only emptiness behind, filled with a cold wind that blew straight through. Slowly, I turned around. Step by step, I walked in the direction opposite the RV, back toward my old house. It was shabby and worn down, but at least it could still offer me a small corner of peace. Behind me was her world, glamorous, dazzling, and no longer connected to mine. Ahead of me was my world, calm as still water, yet now nothing more than a stagnant pond. Between us lay 3 years of time, dozens of letters that never reached their destination, and a self-righteous mistake that could never be undone, like two lines that briefly crossed before racing away from each other forever. Perhaps there would truly never be another intersection between us again. Chapter 12. The production crew had obviously adjusted their strategy, using Willow's poor health and need for recovery as the reason. They suspended her outdoor filming schedule. Most of the time, she stayed either in her RV or in a temporary lounge that had been set up in the village. The cameras shifted their focus to the other guests and the picturesque countryside scenery. My courtyard seemed to have become a subtle taboo. The production team avoided mentioning it whenever possible, and the other guests silently understood not to come anywhere near it. The discussions throughout the village about Willow and me lasted for several days, but as no new revelations emerged, the excitement gradually died down. In the internet age, trending topics rise quickly and disappear just as fast. New headlines replaced old ones. Only a handful of curious onlookers occasionally visited my account to ask about what happened next. When they received no response, they eventually lost interest and moved on. Life seemed to return to its original track, quiet, monotonous, the same routine day after day. But I knew something had changed. I no longer dared to watch television at the village convenience store, afraid that I might accidentally see news about her. The phone number ending in 1017 never sent another message. The metal box, along with the unopened letters inside, felt like a hallucination, appearing abruptly and disappearing just as completely. I continued my usual routine, working the fields, pulling weeds, watering crops, watching the vegetable seedlings grow a little taller every day. Yet there was always a hollow place inside me, as though something was missing. Nothing seemed capable of holding my interest anymore. Sometimes my second uncle would look at me as if he wanted to say something. In the end, he would only shake his head and hand me a cigarette. I didn't smoke. Still, I accepted it and held it between my fingers, watching it slowly burn down to ash. Occasionally, I would catch sight of Willow. Sometimes after filming wrapped for the day, she would be walking slowly along the village paths, dressed in a simple hoodie and jeans, wearing a hat and mask, accompanied by her assistant. The setting sun stretched her shadow into a long silhouette. She looked fragile and lonely. We never greeted each other. We never even exchanged glances. Like two complete strangers, we simply passed by one another. Other times, early in the morning, when I opened my courtyard gate, I would find something left outside my fence. Sometimes it was a box of beautifully packaged imported pastries. Sometimes it was several brand new books on organic farming and crop cultivation. There was never a name attached, but I knew exactly who had left them there. She no longer tried to talk to me. She no longer questioned me. Instead, she stubbornly left behind traces of herself in this silent way. I never touched any of the things she left. I simply let them remain there. The pastries would eventually be carried away by stray cats passing through. The books would become damp from the morning dew. Then the next day, new items would appear. It was as though we were engaged in a silent and childish tug-of-war. She left things behind. I refused to accept them. Neither of us was willing to back down. Neither of us was willing to speak first, until the final day of filming. That afternoon, I was in the backyard reinforcing a newly built grape trellis when my second uncle came running over. The production crew is taking a group photo of the whole village, he said. At the threshing ground by the village entrance. They want you there too. I wanted to refuse, but my second uncle said the village chief had spoken. Every household had to send at least one representative as support for the village's work. So I had no choice. I washed my hands, changed into a slightly cleaner shirt, and followed my second uncle there. Quite a crowd had already gathered at the threshing ground. The production crew had set up their equipment. The guests stood among the village elders and children, creating a lively atmosphere. Willow was there as well. She stood among the guests, wearing the show's matching event t-shirt. A polite yet distant smile rested on her face as she chatted with a veteran artist standing beside her. When I arrived, her gaze seemed to pause on me for the briefest fraction of a second. Then it shifted away naturally, as if I were nothing more than an insignificant speck of dust in the background. I couldn't quite describe what I felt. I found a spot at the very edge of the crowd and stood there, doing my best to make myself invisible. Chapter 13. The group photo went smoothly. As soon as the director shouted, "Say cheese," the crowd cheered and began to disperse. The production crew started packing up their equipment in preparation for leaving. Villagers surrounded the guests, asking for autographs and photos. The scene quickly became chaotic. I was just about to turn and leave when I suddenly heard the sharp cry of a child. Following the sound, I saw a little boy, no older than 3 or 4, who had somehow slipped free from his parents and run toward the edge of the threshing ground, where filming equipment had been temporarily stacked. Several heavy metal poles used to secure lighting rigs were leaning there. Someone accidentally bumped into them. One of the poles swayed, then it began falling directly toward the little boy. "Watch out!" Shouts erupted from all around. The boy's mother let out a terrified scream and tried to rush forward, but the crowd blocked her path. Everything happened too fast. I was the closest. Almost purely on instinct, I lunged forward. Just as the heavy metal pole was about to smash into the boy's head, I threw out my arm and shoulder, forcibly taking the full weight of the falling pole. Bang! The metal pole crashed into my shoulder blade. The tremendous impact forced a muffled groan from me. Half my body instantly went numb as a sharp explosion of pain shot through me, but I gritted my teeth and used every ounce of strength I had to shove the pole aside. Clang! The pole scraped past the boy's body and slammed into the dirt beside him, sending dust flying everywhere. The little boy was so frightened that he forgot how to cry. He simply sat on the ground in stunned silence. My baby. His mother finally rushed over and pulled him into her arms. The delayed fear overwhelmed her, and she burst into tears. People crowded around immediately. My God, that was close. Good thing this young man was here. "George, are you okay?" Bracing myself against my knees, I slowly straightened up. A piercing pain shot through my left shoulder. The impact had clearly been serious. My arm burned as well. The skin had probably been scraped open. I carefully moved my arm. Fortunately, the bones seemed to be fine. "I'm okay." I waved my hand dismissively and looked toward the still sobbing little boy in his mother's arms. "The kid isn't hurt, right?" No, he's fine. Thank you so much." The boy's mother thanked me repeatedly, tears streaming down her face. The crowd parted. Willow strode over quickly. The calm composure she normally carried was gone. In its place was a rare tension that left her face almost pale. Pushing through the people in front of her, she scanned me rapidly. Her gaze landed on my left shoulder, where red stains were already beginning to seep through beneath my hand. "You're injured." Her voice was tight. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. "It's nothing," I replied. "Just a scrape." Instinctively, I tried to lower my hand and hide it. "Don't move." Her voice cracked like a whip. She stepped forward and grabbed my wrist without hesitation. The strength of her grip surprised me. She glanced at the scraped wound on my arm before looking at the shoulder I was covering. Her brows knitted tightly together. Turning around, she shouted to her assistant, "Lisa, the first aid kit." Her tone was more urgent than I had ever heard before. "Willow, but..." Lisa hesitated and glanced at the growing number of phones being raised around them. "Go, now." Willow's voice carried unquestionable authority. Lisa didn't dare waste another second. She immediately turned and ran toward the RV. The entire scene fell silent. Everyone's attention was focused on Willow and me. Surprise, curiosity, speculation, and cameras. The director hurried over as well, still shaken by what had happened. "Mr. Wong, how are you? Quick, let's get you to the clinic. Tony, go get the car." "No need." I quickly refused. "Really? It's nothing, just a minor flesh wound. I'll clean it and put some antiseptic on it when I get home." Willow ignored me. She ignored the director too. She simply held my wrist tightly, her eyes fixed on the increasingly visible bloodstain spreading across my shoulder. Her lips were pressed into a thin, pale line. Lisa came running back, breathing hard, with the first aid kit in her hands. Willow snatched it from her, almost roughly. She flipped it open and searched through the contents, pulling out antiseptic solution, cotton swabs, and gauze. The hand she used to unscrew the antiseptic bottle trembled ever so slightly. Chapter 14. She pointed at a flat stone nearby and ordered, "Sit down." I gave a bitter smile. "Willow, I'm really thin." I said sit down. She suddenly looked up at me. At some point, her eyes had turned red. Complex emotions churned within them, anger, lingering fear, and something else. "George, do you have to wait until your bones are broken before you'll admit you're hurt?" Her expression and tone left me speechless. I obediently sat down on the stone. She crouched in front of me, but her movements immediately became incredibly gentle. Using tweezers, she picked up a cotton ball soaked in antiseptic and carefully cleaned the bleeding scrape on my arm. The cool sensation mixed with a sharp sting. I couldn't help hissing through my teeth. Her hand paused for a moment. Then her touch became even lighter. With her head lowered, her thick eyelashes cast a small shadow beneath her eyes. The sunlight illuminated her delicate profile. I could see tiny beads of sweat on the tip of her nose and the bloodless lips pressed tightly together. The noisy crowd, the flashing cameras, they all seemed to disappear. The world narrowed down to her slightly trembling fingertips and the subtle yet unmistakable mixture of pain and coolness spreading through my wound. She treated it with complete concentration, carefully, meticulously, first disinfecting it, then applying ointment, then wrapping it gently with clean gauze. Throughout the entire process, she didn't say a word. Her brows remained tightly furrowed. Your shoulder, let me see it. After finishing with my arm, she spoke softly. Her voice sounded a little hoarse. It's really fine, I said. I just got hit. It'll probably bruise a bit. I tried to refuse. The location of the injury made things awkward. She said nothing. She simply looked up at me quietly. In those beautiful eyes, still tinged with red, determination was written plainly, and beneath it, a faint trace of pleading. I sighed. Accepting my fate, I removed the hand covering my shoulder and pulled my collar aside slightly. Near my left collarbone, a large bruise had already spread across the skin. The area was swollen badly. The sight was alarming. Willow's breathing faltered almost imperceptibly. She picked up a bottle of medicinal oil meant to reduce bruising and improve circulation. Pouring some into her palm, she rubbed her hands together to warm it. Then she gently placed her warm palm over the bruised area. MMPH. The sudden warmth and pressure caught me off guard. Pain shot through me, and a groan escaped my lips. Her hand paused. Then the pressure became even lighter. Using her fingertips, she slowly began massaging the injury. The sharp scent of the medicinal oil spread through the air, mingling with the faint, familiar fragrance she carried. Her fingertips were slightly cool. Her palms were warm. Again and again, she worked carefully at the bruise. The movements were awkward, even clumsy, yet I could feel how hard she was trying to control her strength. How focused she was on being careful. We were very close. Close enough for me to see the fine strands of hair on her face. Close enough to feel her gentle breaths brushing against my skin. Several strands of hair had fallen across her forehead, swaying softly with each movement. Time seemed to stretch endlessly in that moment. Slow, heavy, viscous. I could feel countless eyes watching us. I could hear suppressed whispers and the rapid clicking of camera shutters. But all of it felt distant. Everything beyond the small, quiet space between the two of us had been shut out. She kept her head lowered. Her long lashes trembled occasionally. The tiny bead of sweat on her nose never disappeared. She massaged the bruise for a long time, so long that the skin beneath her palm felt almost scorched by its warmth. Only then did she slowly stop. Yet she remained in the same position. She didn't look up. She didn't pull her hand away. In a voice so soft that only the two of us could hear, she finally spoke. George, you're still just as foolish. Her voice was thick with emotion. A heavy nasal tone lingered in it, and beneath it, a faint trace of a sob she was desperately trying to suppress. You could have ignored it. My heart clenched violently. It felt as though an invisible hand had grabbed it and squeezed. The ache was sharp and overwhelming. I wanted to say something, anything, but my throat felt blocked. No words would come. At last, she lifted her head. Her eyes were redder than before, yet the clarity had returned to them, along with the familiar layer of distance she always used to protect herself. She withdrew her hand, picking up the gauze. She wrapped it around my shoulder several times with noticeably unpracticed movements before securing it in place. After finishing, she quickly packed the first aid kit. Then she stood up, taking 2 steps backward. She re-established the distance between us. Chapter 15. Willow said, "Don't let the wound get wet. Apply the medicine twice a day." Her tone was professional and matter-of-fact. Her eyes landed on my face for a moment before quickly moving away. Looking toward the director, she added, "Director, please handle everything else. I'm going back to rest." After saying that, she didn't look at me. She didn't look at anyone else. Turning around, she straightened her back and, accompanied by her assistant, walked briskly away from the threshing ground. Her figure remained slender and upright. Her steps never faltered. It was as if the woman who had crouched in front of me moments ago, eyes red as she treated my injuries and spoke through a choked voice, had been nothing more than a hallucination. Only the lingering scent of medicinal oil in the air and the burning warmth her palm had left on my shoulder reminded me that everything that had just happened was real. I sat on the stone, watching her retreating figure disappear farther and farther away. My injured shoulder throbbed faintly, yet inside me rose an indescribably complicated feeling. The director walked over and patted my shoulder. "George, we really owe you one today. The production team is definitely going to thank you properly later. You should head home and rest. If you need anything at all, Just let us know. I snapped back to reality and forced a smile. It's fine, Director. Anyone would have done the same. The villagers gathered around me as well. They praised me, worried about my injuries, and spoke over one another in concern. I responded politely, but my thoughts had already drifted far away. Willow's final words, the redness in her eyes, they replayed in my mind over and over like scenes from a slow-motion film. George, you're still just as foolish. You could have ignored it. Was she blaming me for being reckless? Or was she worried about me? The moment that thought appeared, it spread wildly like weeds after rain. But then I remembered the way she had turned away without hesitation. And that cold, sharp insult, bastard, the tiny, inappropriate spark of hope that had just begun to form was instantly extinguished by reality. Perhaps she had only acted out of basic human compassion, or perhaps out of a lingering softness toward someone she had once known. Nothing more. Slowly, I stood up. The pain in my left shoulder reminded me once again of everything that had happened. The crowd gradually dispersed. The threshing ground returned to its usual emptiness. The setting sun painted the horizon in magnificent shades of orange and red. I brushed the dust from my clothes and started walking home, one step at a time. The next morning, the production crew packed up and left in a grand procession. The village returned to its former tranquility. It was as though the noise and excitement of those few days had been nothing more than a lively dream. Only the traces of filming left behind in my courtyard and the occasional conversations among villagers during their spare moments proved that the dream had really happened. My life seemed to return to normal as well, working in the fields, taking care of the vegetable garden, adding the final bamboo poles to the grape trellis. The bruising on my shoulder slowly faded. The scrape on my arm formed a scab that itched constantly as it healed. The medicine Willow had left behind worked very well, but I never used it again. The bottle with its foreign language label was placed in the deepest corner of a cabinet, together with other old belongings I no longer looked at. Sometimes my second uncle would cautiously bring up the subject. Kiddo, that day when Miss Lou bandaged your wounds, she looked pretty worried. I would simply grunt in acknowledgement and lower my head to continue eating, refusing to continue the conversation. My second uncle would sigh, then he would stop asking. Chapter 16. The storm online gradually died down as well. Occasionally, content farms still tried to milk the story of the mysterious countryside hero saving the damsel in distress, but without any follow-up developments. Public interest quickly faded. My social media accounts fell silent. The private messages became fewer and fewer until they eventually stopped altogether. Maybe that was for the best. This was the distance that should have existed from the start. She was an unreachable star. I was dust on the ground. Our paths had crossed by chance, creating a ripple that meant little in the grand scheme of things. Then our separate orbits continued on their way, until one evening, a week later, I was sitting beneath the old locust tree in my yard, repairing a worn-out hoe with the last traces of daylight. My second uncle had gone into town. The village was quiet. Only the chirping of birds returning to their nests filled the air. Then came the soft creak of the fence gate opening. Assuming my second uncle had returned, I didn't even look up. Second uncle, dinner's in the pot. Heat it up yourself. No answer came. I lifted my head. Willow was standing at the gate. She wasn't wearing a hat. She wasn't wearing a mask. Her assistant wasn't with her. She had come alone. A simple white shirt, light-colored jeans, canvas shoes dusted with dirt from the road. The glow of the setting sun outlined her figure with a soft golden halo as the evening breeze stirred the loose strands of hair beside her cheeks. She looked thinner than she had during the filming, but her eyes were bright. Quietly, she looked at me. In her hand was the familiar rusty metal box. My fingers tightened instinctively around the handle of the hoe. My heart gave a heavy, uncontrollable thump. Time seemed to freeze. In the distance, cooking smoke curled into the sky. Nearby, chickens and ducks returned to their pens. The world continued moving at its usual pace. Only our small courtyard seemed to have been placed on pause. Why was she here? Hadn't the show ended long ago? Shouldn't she have returned to her glamorous world, filming dramas, attending events, shining beneath endless spotlights? Countless questions churned through my mind, yet I couldn't ask a single one. I could only stare at her, watch her walk across the yard, step by step, until she stood before me. The setting sun stretched our shadows across the dirt ground until they overlapped. She stopped in front of me. Her gaze swept briefly over the hoe in my hand before settling on my face. Come. There was none of the intensity from the threshing ground, none of the coldness from outside the RV. Instead, there was a stillness I couldn't understand, a calm as deep as a bottomless lake. How's the injury? She asked softly. It's healed. My own voice sounded dry to my ears. More or less. She nodded. Without another word, she held out the metal box. I didn't take it. I simply looked at her. Take it. Her tone left no room for argument. After a moment's hesitation, I set down the hoe and wiped the sweat from my palms against my pants. Then I accepted the box. It felt light. The thick stack of letters seemed to be gone. What about the letters? I asked. I burned them. Her answer was immediate. Her eyes remained fixed on my face, as if studying my reaction. I scattered the ashes into the river. For a moment, I didn't know what to feel, relief, or an even deeper sense of loss. However, her tone shifted. From the canvas bag at her side, she pulled out something else, a plain light blue hardcover notebook. Its corners were worn. It was obvious that it had been opened and read countless times. I kept a copy of the contents. She held the notebook out to me. Her voice was as calm as if she were discussing the weather. What I burned was my attachment to the past. But this. She extended the notebook farther. I think you have the right to know. I stared at it without taking it. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard that my ears rang. Willow. I licked my dry lips. You didn't have to do this. I never received those letters. That's my fault. You don't need to keep using this method anymore. I'm not asking for your opinion, George. She interrupted me. Then she took another small step forward. The distance between us shrank until I could smell the faint, clean scent of soap lingering on her clothes, mixed with a subtle trace of elegant perfume that belonged to a distant city. She raised her eyes and looked directly into mine. The sunset reflected in her gaze like two small, stubborn flames. Word by word, she spoke with absolute clarity. I came here to tell you something, and to tell myself something too. For 3 years, I spent 3 years trying to process the fact that you left without saying goodbye. I thought I had let it go. I thought I had succeeded. I won awards. I stood on bigger stages. I was seen by more people. I was loved by more people. I kept telling myself. A faint smile touched her lips, though it carried no real happiness. Look, Willow, without him, your life is better, more exciting, more brilliant. Chapter 17. She spoke slowly, deliberately. Every word carried weight. But when I pushed open this gate and saw you squatting there, pulling carrots out of the ground like nothing had ever happened, she paused. A faint, self-mocking smile tugged at the corner of her lips. That's when I realized I was wrong. Completely wrong. I held my breath and looked at her. Willow shook her head. All that grievance, all that anger, all that resentment and confusion, they never disappeared. I just hid them away, buried them in a corner so deep that even I couldn't find them anymore. And then you. She glanced around the courtyard. And this place. You dug them all back up without even trying. She took a deep breath, as though gathering courage. George, I hated you. I hated your self-righteousness. I hated the way you disappeared without a word. I hated that you turned me into a fool who questioned herself and tortured herself over and over. I even thought that if I ever saw you again, I'd curse you out until I felt satisfied. Or maybe I'd pretend I didn't know you at all and let you experience what it felt like to be ignored. Then her voice softened. A faint tremor slipped into it. But, when I saw that pole falling toward you, my mind went completely blank. There was only one thought in my head. You couldn't get hurt. Her eyes reddened slightly, yet they shone with astonishing brightness. She stared at me stubbornly, refusing to let me look away. That was when I understood. George, hate only exists because you still care. Anger only exists because you still haven't let go. I was angry at you. I resented you. But more than anything, I was terrified that something would happen to you. She bit her lower lip, as though it took every ounce of strength she possessed to say the next words. It's been 3 years. I tried. I tried filling every second of my life with work. I tried meeting new people. I tried convincing myself that you were nothing more than an insignificant passerby in my life, but I couldn't. She shook her head. At last, tears rolled down her cheeks. No, George, I couldn't do it. When I see you hurt, I panic. When I see you avoiding me, it hurts. When I see this courtyard, when I see that persimmon tree, when I see that old well, when I see anything connected to you, I still remember. I remember you saying you'd plant a watermelon field so big we'd never finish eating them. I remember the chilled mung bean soup we kept cooling in the well during summer. I remember you climbing trees to pick persimmons for me. I remember you falling. I remember you scraping your knees and still grinning at me like an idiot. Her tears flowed even harder. Her voice broke repeatedly. Yet she stubbornly continued. Time didn't make me forget you, George. It only fermented everything connected to you into a stronger, more bitter wine. I thought I'd quit, but the moment I catch even the faintest scent of it, everything falls apart. I stood frozen, as if someone had cast a spell over me. So, she wiped her tears away fiercely. Lifting her chin, she looked at me with the determination of someone gambling everything on a single outcome. I'm done running, George, and I'm not going to let you run anymore either. Those letters were what the old me wanted to say to the old you. Whether you read them or not doesn't matter anymore. The ashes are already scattered. Consider it closure for those 3 years. She gently placed the light blue notebook onto the stone mill beside me. But this is what the present me wants to say to the present you. She stepped back, yet her gaze remained locked onto mine. George, I didn't come here to settle old scores, and I didn't come here to beg you to take me back. None of that matters. I came here to tell you something. Her eyes trembled slightly, Yet her voice never wavered. I still like you. More than I did 3 years ago. More than I ever have. Whether I'm a celebrity or not. Whether you're here or somewhere else. None of that matters. The only thing this has anything to do with is me. Willow. The evening breeze swept through the courtyard. It stirred the strands of hair across her forehead. It also carried the familiar scent that always made my heart tremble. You can keep hiding. You can keep thinking you're not good enough. You can come up with 10,000 reasons to push me away. That's your freedom. But liking you is my choice. I can't control you. And you don't get to control me either. Her voice wasn't loud. Yet every word rang with astonishing clarity. With the determination of someone who had burned all bridges behind her. The words echoed through the deepening twilight. Starting today, I'm going to pursue you. In every way I can think of. Every way that won't disturb you. But will make sure you see me. Until you fall in love with me again. Or until I finally give up completely. When she finished speaking, it was as though a crushing burden had finally left her shoulders. She let out a long, soft breath. The tear tracks on her face had not yet dried. Yet a relieved smile appeared. Light. Free. Almost childlike. All right. I'm done. She looked at me one last time. That gaze was impossible to decipher. Relief. Stubbornness. And a faint trace of nervousness hidden beneath it all. Then she turned around. Her steps were light. Steady. Resolute. She walked toward the fence gate through which she had entered. She never looked back. She never gave me a chance to speak. I remained rooted to the spot. Like a weathered stone statue. The rusty metal box was still in my hands. Beside me rested the heavy light blue notebook. At last, the sun disappeared completely beyond the horizon. The final traces of daylight were swallowed by the approaching night. Darkness settled over the courtyard. Only the scattered lights from distant homes flickered in the growing dusk. Chapter 18. The evening breeze carried a chill. It brushed against my face, yet it couldn't cool the heat raging inside my chest. Every word Willow had spoken echoed endlessly through my mind. I'm going to pursue you, until you fall in love with me again, or until I finally give up completely. So decisive, so direct, so, Willow. There had been no detours, no testing the waters. She had laid every card on the table, every vulnerability, every ounce of courage, without holding anything back. It was like a piece of red-hot iron, without warning. It pressed against a heart I had convinced myself had long since scarred over. The pain was sharp, yet it was also so intensely warm that it made me tremble. Slowly, I lowered my head. I looked at the rusty metal box in my hands, then at the notebook resting quietly on the stone mill. So what was this supposed to be? A reply that had arrived 3 years too late? Or the beginning of something new? Something even more chaotic than before? I didn't know. The only thing I knew was that the peace I had spent 3 years carefully maintaining, the emotional walls I had believed were unbreakable, had crumbled completely before those few words she had spoken. They had been far more fragile than I ever imagined. The truth was, I had never truly let go. I had simply buried her, buried every feeling connected to her, the racing heartbeat, the hope, the inferiority, the cowardice, all of it. I buried everything in the deepest grave inside my heart and convinced myself it was nothing more than an insignificant old dream. Now the grave had been opened, light had poured inside, and I had nowhere left to hide. The night wind grew stronger, carrying with it the scent of distant fields. I stood there for a very long time. A very, very long time. Only when I heard my second uncle's footsteps outside the courtyard did I suddenly snap back to reality. As if fleeing from something, I grabbed the notebook from the stone mill along with the metal box and rushed into my room. I slammed the door shut, leaning against the cold wooden panel behind me. I could still feel my heart pounding violently inside my chest. The hard corners of the notebook dug painfully into my palm. Just like her final look, just like those words she had spoken, they pressed relentlessly against my heart, leaving behind a mark that was vivid, burning, and impossible to ignore ever again. Chapter 19. That night, I couldn't sleep. Willow's words played in my mind like a recording stuck on repeat. Every syllable, every pause, even the slight tremble at the end of her sentences, her reddened eyes, and the stubborn determination in her gaze were vivid down to the smallest detail. I still like you. I'm going to pursue you, until you fall in love with me again, or until I finally give up completely. Decisive, direct, leaving no room for retreat. Just like her, ever since she was a child, whenever she wanted something, she would do everything possible to get it. The only difference was that back then she relied on pouting and stubborn persistence. Now, she made declarations without the slightest attempt to hide them. I buried my face in my pillow, trying to force those voices and images out of my head. It was useless. In the end, I simply sat up and turned on the light. Under the dim yellow glow, the light blue notebook rested quietly on the desk. The metal box sat beside it like a silent witness. I stared at the notebook for a long time. My hand reached out. My fingertips touched the hard cover. Then I jerked them back as though I had been burned. Read it. Or leave it unread. If I read it, what would that mean? It would mean facing the 3 years of her life that I had missed. It would mean tearing open a wound I had convinced myself had healed and seeing what had become of it beneath the surface. And if I didn't read it, pretend it didn't exist, keep my head buried in the sand and act as though none of this had happened. But Willow had already arrived with a shovel and completely dug up the hole I had been hiding in. Frustrated, I raked a hand through my hair. In the end, I reached out and picked up the notebook. It was light, yet it felt heavier than a mountain. The first page was blank. I turned it. Her handwriting appeared immediately. Elegant, strong. The words weren't written on stationery. They were written directly into the notebook. There was no greeting, no signature. It felt like a private diary, or perhaps letters written to me that had never been intended to be sent. The first entry read, "George, it's raining today. London's rain is so annoying, damp and clingy, nothing like home, where it either pours properly or doesn't rain at all. It reminded me of how you never liked carrying an umbrella. You always said drizzle felt nice. Then Aunt Lou would scold you every single time. So stupid." The date was from 3 years ago, shortly after she had gone abroad. My fingers paused before turning the page. The next entry read, "Today my language teacher praised me. I'm happy. I wanted to tell you." Then I opened our chat window and remembered. "Oh right, you blocked me. George, you're such a bastard. I passed an audition. It's only a small role, but I have lines. The director said I have talent. If you were here, you'd probably curl your lip and say, 'Of course, you're my desk partner. Too bad you're not here, bastard.' I got pushed around by one of the actresses in my group today. They mocked my accent. It's fine. I'll prove myself. I'm just a little tired. If you were here, you'd probably tell some awkward joke that wasn't funny, or drag me out for a good meal. George, I miss that spicy hot pot place behind the school. The one with way too much sesame sauce. Bastard. I won an award. A very small one. But it's my first acting award. The stage lights were so bright I could barely keep my eyes open. Lots of people applauded, but the person I most wanted to see wasn't there. George, did you see the news? Were you even a little happy for me? Forget it. You probably never saw it. Bastard. I dreamed about you again. In the dream, you told me, 'Willow, don't go. Stay.' I woke up laughing. Then I cried. George, I hate you. It's been 100 days. You still haven't contacted me. George, did you really abandon me? George, someone confessed to me today. A very impressive senior. I turned him down. I told him I already liked someone, and that he was waiting for me back home. See, I'm such a good liar. I even fooled myself. It snowed today. London's first snow. I heard it snowed back home too. George, do you remember when we promised we'd watch the first snowfall together? Happy New Year. George, a new year without you isn't happy at all. George, I'm tired. I don't want to like you anymore, but I don't think I can stop. George, if this is what you want, then I'll give you what you want." The date of the final entry stopped 2 years ago. The handwriting was messy. Part of the page had been blurred by water stains. Tears, perhaps. The pages after that were blank. Page after page, nothing. Until the very last page. There was new handwriting there. The ink looked fresh. It must have been written recently. Only 2 short lines. I tried. I lost. There was no date, no signature, just those few words, pressed so hard into the paper that they seemed carved there forever. Chapter 20. I closed the notebook and shut my eyes. It felt as though my chest had been stuffed with waterlogged cotton, heavy, suffocating, impossible to breathe through. So while I had been convincing myself that I was walking away gracefully and starting a new life, she had been alone in a foreign country, going through all of that. The complaints, the stories she wanted to share, the hope, then the hurt, the confusion, the self-doubt, and finally the despair. Trying to let go, failing to let go. Every stroke of her pen felt like a knife carving itself into my heart. I had thought my sacrifice was an act of love, but it wasn't. It was cowardice. Nothing more than cowardly escape, and in the process, I had fastened the heaviest chains imaginable around her. I left her to process the pain of abandonment alone in a foreign land. Every time she wanted to share something, every time she needed comfort, every time she needed someone, she was left facing a cold silence that never answered back. Meanwhile, I hid inside this shell I believed was safe, proud of my own clarity, proud of my own detachment. George, you really were a bastard, a complete, self-righteous bastard. It wasn't until dawn was approaching that I finally drifted into a restless sleep. My dreams were chaotic. One moment Willow was at the airport, red-eyed as she clutched my sleeve. The next, she stood beneath dazzling lights on an awards stage, radiant yet hollow-eyed. Then she was standing in the fading evening light from the night before, tears running down her face as she said, "I still like you." When I woke up, my head felt like it was splitting apart. The sky outside was already bright. Birds chirped noisily beyond the window. I sat on the bed for a long time, staring into space. The notebook lay quietly beside my pillow, like a piece of red-hot iron. Then I made a decision. I picked up my phone. Opened the number I hadn't called in 3 years, a number I knew by heart, ending in 1017. My finger hovered above the call button, trembling slightly. My heart pounded so hard it felt ready to burst from my chest. I took a deep breath, then another, and pressed it. The line rang only twice before someone answered, so quickly, as if she had been waiting for this call all along. The other end of the line was silent. No words, only the faintest sound of breathing. My throat tightened painfully, dry, raw. I opened my mouth. When my voice finally emerged, it was rough and hoarse. Willow, MHM. She answered softly. Silence filled the line again. Only the faint static of the connection and her barely audible breathing remained. I tightened my grip on the phone. My fingertips were ice cold. All the words I had rehearsed countless times were suddenly trapped inside my throat, a tangled knot. When I finally managed to speak, my voice sounded terrible. I read the notebook. MHM. Her response was quiet, impossible to read. I swallowed. I'm sorry. The words felt weak, worthless, yet they were all I could offer. Willow, I'm sorry. For everything. A nearly inaudible sigh came through the receiver. George. At last she spoke. Her voice traveled through the line carrying a distant weariness, and a strange kind of peace. I've already spent the last 3 years saying sorry to myself 10,000 times. I kept telling myself I wasn't good enough. That's why you left. I told myself I didn't understand you. That's why being with me became exhausting. I told myself I was too clingy, too annoying, too self-important, too convinced that you'd always be waiting for me. Her voice remained calm, almost emotionless, yet every word landed like a hammer. A dull ache spread through my chest. So stop apologizing. Your apology invalidates all the pain I went through during those 3 years. That pain was real. It proves that I truly lived through those years, even if they were awful. My throat tightened. No words came out. A burning ache spread through my nose and eyes. George. She paused. Her voice dropped lower. A faint tremor slipped through despite her efforts. I only want to ask you one question. Ask me. The response came out immediately, like a drowning man reaching for a lifeline. Several more seconds of silence followed, as if she were gathering courage. Then she spoke. Her voice was very soft. Very, very soft. Yet the weight of it felt overwhelming. George, do you still like me? Not out of guilt. Not because you're trying to make up for the past. Not because you're nostalgic. Right now, at this very moment, looking at me as the person I am today. Her voice trembled slightly. George, do you still like Willow? Chapter 21. The world seemed to stop at that moment. The birds outside the window, the rustling of leaves in the wind, the distant barking of a dog. All of it faded away. Only my thunderous heartbeat remained, along with the faint, cautious sound of her breathing traveling through the phone line. She was waiting for an answer delayed by 3 years, an answer that had crossed oceans and mountains, carrying the weight of countless misunderstandings and wounds. I closed my eyes. What flashed before me was not the countless memories of the past 20 years. Instead, it was every vivid, painful moment since we had met again. The icy look in her eyes when she first pushed open the gate, the pale, fragile face she wore when she collapsed in my courtyard, the hurt hidden deep in her eyes when she called me a bastard through tears, the tiny beads of sweat on her nose as she crouched on the threshing ground, hands trembling while treating my wounds, and last night, standing in the twilight, tears running down her face, her back still straight as she wagered everything on one final chance and said, I'm going to pursue you. The stubborn flame in her eyes refused to die. All the emotions I had deliberately ignored and desperately suppressed broke free. Like spring floods bursting through melting ice, they shattered every dam built from lies and self-deception. There was nowhere left to run. I had always thought love was the excitement of youth, the companionship of growing up together. Only now did I finally understand. Love was this. Even after being wounded, even after years of separation and misunderstanding, the moment I saw her again, my heart still lost control for her. Love was knowing the road ahead might still be difficult, yet no longer being able to bear a life without her in it. My voice trembled. I do. The words came out dry, yet unmistakably clear, without hesitation. On the other end of the line, her breathing seemed to stop for a moment. Then I heard her draw a small breath, a breath of relief. A faint sob lingered beneath it. Say it again. Her voice softened. There was a little stubbornness in it, a little sweetness. Just like the little girl she used to be, the one who would never give up until she got the answer she wanted. My heart melted completely. I do. I repeated it. My voice grew steadier, filled with a tenderness and certainty I hadn't even realized were there. Willow, I love you. Not in the past. Now. I always have. A quiet sound of restrained crying came through the phone. Soft, yet it melted every piece of armor I had spent years building around myself. George. She was crying, yet somehow she sounded like she was smiling too. You're such a huge bastard. You made me wait so long. Yeah, My throat tightened. My eyes burned. I am. She sniffled. So what are you going to do about it? She sounded like a child demanding an explanation. I looked out the window. The morning sunlight was perfect. It spilled across the quiet courtyard I had guarded for 3 years. You said last night that you were going to pursue me. A smile crept onto my face. How about now? How about I pursue you instead? Willow, I'm not the self-righteous fool I was 3 years ago. I still don't know how to say beautiful things. I'll probably never be great at farming, and I may never fit into your dazzling world, but I have a courtyard full of watermelons we'll never finish eating. I have an old well that can still chill mung bean soup in the summer. I can still climb trees to pick persimmons, though I'll probably still fall out of them. And I have a heart that's far too late, but one thing is certain, it only wants to love you. I paused. Warm tears slid down my face. Willow, would you be willing to give this bastard a chance to make things right, a chance to pursue you all over again? The crying stopped. Silence remained. Several long seconds. They felt like an entire century. Then I heard her voice, thick with tears, yet brighter than sunlight, perfectly clear. I would, she said. George, if you ever run away again, I'll tear up every piece of land in the world if I have to. I'll find you, tie you to my side, and annoy you for the rest of your life. I laughed, even as my tears fell harder. Deal. I smiled. I'm not running anymore, not even if someone breaks my legs. Sunlight flooded the room without restraint. It illuminated the light blue notebook on the table, and the rusty metal box beside it. Dust drifted lazily through the golden beam of light, like a gentle redemption finally arriving after an endless winter. And thankfully, time had not yet run out. Neither of us had grown old. Thankfully, after crossing mountains and rivers, after searching through all the years between us, when I finally turned around, you were still there, and so was I. Chapter 22, Extra, the time Willow pretended to turn villainous. Willow had a little-known hobby. She especially enjoyed watching me panic and flail around helplessly. It took me 3 full months of marriage to completely figure that out. That day, I came home from work and immediately sensed something was off the moment I opened the door. The lights were off. Only a sliver of sunset filtered through the gap in the curtains. The air carried the faint scent of her favorite perfume, though it was stronger than usual. Willow. I put down my keys and walked further inside. No answer. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open, then froze in the doorway. Willow was sitting on the edge of our bed with her back to me. She was wearing one of my old shirts. It hung loosely on her frame, exposing her pale neck and collarbones. Her hair was tied up casually, with a few loose strands framing her face. The scene was actually beautiful. If she hadn't been holding the gleaming utility knife I used for opening packages, and if she hadn't been slowly scraping the tip of it across a familiar wooden box on the nightstand. It was my box of old keepsakes. Nothing valuable inside, just old student IDs, a few coins, and several class photos from our high school graduation. You're home. She didn't turn around. Her voice floated lazily through the room. The knife never stopped moving. A soft scratching sound echoed as it dragged across the wooden lid. My heart skipped a beat. The atmosphere, the lighting, the dialogue. Why did this feel exactly like the entrance scene of the villainous second female lead from that melodramatic mystery series she forced me to watch last week? I steadied myself and walked over. What are you doing? I asked, trying to sound casual. She finally turned around. Her expression was blank. Her eyes looked distant, yet a faintly unsettling smile lingered at the corner of her lips. Looking for something, she raised an old yellowed photograph. It was my high school graduation picture. I was standing in the back row, smiling like an idiot. Looking for what? I sat down beside her, causing the mattress to sink slightly. She turned her head toward me. The sunset illuminated half her face. Her eyelashes cast long shadows beneath her eyes. I'm trying to figure out. She pointed the knife toward a blurry female figure standing beside me in the photograph. Who this is? I leaned closer. The girl had a ponytail. Time had blurred most of her features. I searched my memory. I think she was the class academic representative. Her surname might have been Bai. I honestly don't remember. Really. She dragged out the word. The tip of the knife slowly traced a circle around the girl's silhouette. Because I seemed to remember her giving you a love letter. I was speechless. That happened back in high school. The only person I ever paid attention to was Willow. A love letter? From who? When? My utterly confused expression apparently amused her. She laughed softly. Then she set down both the photograph and the utility knife. Without warning, she leaned closer. The scent of her shampoo mixed with the warmth radiating from her body. George. Her cool fingers brushed gently against my cheek. Her voice lowered into an intentionally unhealthy-sounding sweetness. The fact that I wasn't part of your past. She sighed dramatically. What a shame. My eyelid twitched. But her fingers slid downward, stopping lightly at my throat. Your present and your future. She traced her fingertip lightly across my skin. Every minute, every second, they all belonged to me. She stared directly into my eyes, speaking slowly and clearly. From your hair, to your toes, from your heartbeat, to every breath, they're all mine. Her fingertip tapped lightly against my chest. If I ever discover that there's someone else inside here. She paused, then suddenly smiled brilliantly, leaning close to my ear. She let her warm breath brush against it. I'll tie you up and lock you in a basement. You'll only be allowed to look at me, think about me, and talk to me. How does that sound? George. Chapter 23. I was speechless. Silence. 10 full seconds of silence. I looked at her face only inches away from mine. That flawless, beautiful face was trying its best to maintain a possessive, darkly obsessive expression, but deep in her eyes, the familiar spark of satisfaction from a successful prank, along with her slightly trembling eyelashes, completely gave her away. I sighed, then reached out and caught the hand that was still causing trouble near my throat. Willow. I called her by her full name. She blinked. What is it? Calmly, I said. First, the girl who gave me a love letter in high school wasn't the academic representative. It was the arts committee member from the class next door. You remembered the wrong person. Willow froze. The villainous expression on her face cracked instantly. I continued. Second, that utility knife is brand new. I bought it yesterday. The blade seal hasn't even been removed yet. The plastic cover is still attached. You've been waving around a knife handle this whole time. Aren't you tired? Willow was speechless. She looked down at her so-called weapon. The tips of her ears turned red at a speed visible to the naked eye. Third, I lifted her hand and pressed a kiss against her cool fingertips. Looking at her helplessly, I said, if you wanted to play a role-playing game, you could have just told me. We don't have a basement, but I cleaned out the attic yesterday. If you want to tie me up somewhere, you're welcome to choose that instead. Willow completely broke character. Ah, George, you're so annoying. She yanked her hand away. The cold, obsessive villain act instantly collapsed into embarrassed frustration. Couldn't you have played along? I spent all afternoon getting into character. I couldn't help laughing. Reaching out, I pulled both her and the oversized shirt into my arms. But I did play along. I rubbed my cheek against the top of her head, breathing in the familiar scent that always put me at ease. Wasn't I taking it very seriously? I was terrified. You were not. She struggled in my embrace and lightly punched my shoulder. You were trying not to laugh. I saw it. That's because. I tightened my arms around her, then lowered my head and brushed a kiss against her reddened ear. The way my wife pretends to be the villain is just too adorable. She froze, then immediately melted against me, burying her burning face in my neck. Who's adorable? Her muffled protest carried absolutely no intimidation. I held her quietly. Outside the window, the last traces of sunset slipped beneath the horizon. The room gradually darkened. So, I stroked her back gently. What script inspired this performance today? She shifted in my arms. Her voice became even quieter. I saw a post online. A joke about testing whether your boyfriend would get scared away by an obsessive girlfriend. I laughed. And what were the test results? She was silent for a moment, then tilted her face upward. In the growing darkness, her eyes sparkled. There was still a hint of lingering moisture in them, but there was also complete trust, complete warmth. It proved. She leaned forward and pressed a soft kiss against the corner of my lips. Her voice was sweet and gentle. That my husband is an idiot. You saw through everything, but you still didn't expose me. You acted along with me. My heart softened completely. Pressing my forehead against hers, I said, yeah, because it's you. If you want to play, I'll play with you. If you want to make trouble, I'll make trouble with you. And if you want to be the villain, I smiled and kissed her lightly, then I'll be your accomplice. For life. She didn't answer. She simply wrapped her arms around me even tighter. The room fell quiet. Only the rhythm of our breathing and heartbeats remained. After a long while, she spoke softly. George, I never really wanted to lock you up. I know, but I really do get jealous. She rubbed her cheek against my chin. Even over things you don't remember anymore. Even ancient jealousy. I laughed. The vibration echoed through my chest. Then my past, present, and future are all in your hands. Please supervise them personally. Conduct close inspections, and never leave my side. At last she smiled. Her eyes curved into beautiful crescents. Deal. Officially approved. No takebacks. Outside the window, lights gradually illuminated home after home. And inside ours, a dramatic performance of pretend villainy had just come to an end.